So I think we'll get this started. Thank you, everyone, for coming on such a beautiful sunny day to celebrate innovation and to celebrate our Innovator of the Year. Tom, it's a pleasure to do this. A joyful occasion is a welcome reprieve. Today's format really is going to be a panel presentation, rapid fire research on tap style, where each research presenter is going to present for just 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. And Sarah will be the time cop. And then I'll ask some questions to the panel. I'll have the panelists come up for questions. And then we'll proceed on to the presentation of the Innovator of the Year. Gloria will present that to Tom. So we have a wonderful panel for you today. We have 4 people from our community who've created companies and have had success commercializing technologies, and we can learn a lot from them. What I asked them to speak about today was the interface between starting a company or creating an innovation at BU and the institution, and how they work together. And I thought that fit well with Tom because Tom is such an important part, a brick in our foundation of our institution. You're part of the institution. You've been here long enough. Yeah, a brick, exactly. A brick. Strong. Yes, yes. But really that interaction between the institution and a startup, I think, is an important topic and really teases out some of the issues. So in their 5 minutes in that structure, I asked them to comment specifically on that. That's what the talks will be about. So the order of events going to be by the way people were introduced to be in their companies. So Paul Bierden, David Freedman, Ed Damiano, and Anand Krishnamurthy. And we're going to go rapid format. So. And Paul, come on up. And then we'll just go automatically, Dave, after Paul's done.
So good afternoon. My name is Paul Bierden. I'm the president, CEO, and co-founder of Boston Micro Machines Corporation. Thanks for having me here, and I'm excited to be here and also to be part of celebrating Tom's good recognition. So a little bit about me. I got my bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering here. I got a master's 10 floors below when this wasn't the Photonics Center. There's a picture of Tom and me circa 1994. We were working on the grinding machine that was part of my master's thesis. And so we're talking about innovations, and we all have to make sacrifices for making small businesses. Tom and I apparently sacrificed our hair. So we founded the company in May of 1999. So yes, we are 25 years old this week. We're actually having our anniversary celebration dinner tomorrow night. We started with a NASA STTR, which is a small business technology transfer grant from NASA, where it was BU and BMC joining together, proposing to do some work on deformable mirror development. What we do is we develop and manufacture advanced adaptive optics and deformable mirror technologies. There we are. So we were asked to come up with what are the top 3 challenges we face when going from being a researcher to a commercializer. So the first thing that came to me was what you think is important isn't necessarily what your customer does. When you're doing research, you're going over and you're going down maybe a rabbit hole or rat hole somewhere trying to tweak some little cool thing out of something. But when you're trying to commercialize it, you got to figure out if the customer cares about that. If your device now goes at 10 kilohertz and you can make it go at 50 kilohertz and you think that's really cool, if the customer is only running at 2 kilohertz, they really don't care. So you should listen to what your customer wants, not what you think is cool and you can do. The other thing is timelines. Researchers aren't necessarily great with timelines. There are no cost extensions in the real world. And the third is hire the right people. And I mean hire people that are not like me. And that's what I had to do. When I first was hiring people, I was hiring other people that were coming from the research world. They wanted to explore in depth how things happen and how we could tweak them and make them better. But when we were really trying to commercialize, I need to hire people who didn't want to push the technology. They wanted to go over and to take the technology we had, make it more efficient, make it easier to make it sure to have the highest quality control. So find out what your company needs, and it's probably not somebody like you to go over and to push the technology forward. Some of the helpful BU resources we had when we started was, one, that grant and contract opportunity. So we started with a NASA grant. We also got a joint grant from DARPA for a program called CCIT. That gave some credibility to a small business. It gave us some money, a couple years of stability, and the ability to go over and kind of explore the area from working with BU. Through that, we had access to facilities. So labs, tooling, equipment, all those things that a new technology company would need, but couldn't afford. I couldn't afford a clean room. I couldn't afford an SEM, but I could go over and working with BU, I was able to use the facilities here to grow the technology and grow the company until we could go off and go on our own and continue that. And the most important thing was people. So we've hired a number of interns and co-ops, but we've also had 3 people that we hired that were graduates, actually all of Tom's Lab, so it's slightly ancestors. But Stephen and Jay were hired right when they came out of school, right with their master's and PhD respectively. So we were able to see what these guys were able to do, what kind of people they were, what kind of their work ethic was, and we hired them right away. Mike in the middle, he got his master's, went off, worked, got an MBA, came back, talked to Tom, because we all come back to talk to Tom when we have problems. And he was looking for a job, and so we hired him from there. So people were a great resource. A resource that would be valuable to give new starting companies and people that are graduating and going off is, it's a program management boot camp. It's something to go over and to teach researchers and academics real product and project management, program management. Researchers can go off on their own and they can wander around a little bit, but being able to go over and come up with clear plans, budgets, resources, working with other people, schedules is something I think would be really valuable to give to new people that are trying to go over and start business in that. And my last thing is some key advice. And so a little bit off script because Mike asked me to go over and give key advice from me to myself when I started the company. But this was actually advice that I got after working with Tom for 10 years, which is just do it. You want to start a business, start a business. You'll learn what you're going to fail. You're going to break things, but that's okay because you can learn how to do it. You're going to realize, I don't know finance, but I can find somebody who can do my finance. I don't know intellectual property law, but I can find somebody who can do that one. So don't be held back by what you don't know. Go forward and learn new things. So thank you.
So yes, I'm here too. I also lost my hair in the journey, so thank you very much. Okay, so just a little bit about myself. I'm from California, actually born in Newton Wellesley, but went to California to UCSD and then came back to BU. And I worked for a lot of faculty, including Ron Nepper, who's here, but he didn't pay my bills. So these 4 guys did. Alan Hubbard, Mark Hornstein, Salim Unlu, and Jason Ritt. And I outlined Salim Unlu because he was the lab I worked in where we actually commercialized our technology, which became NanoView Biosciences. Talk about that in just a second. And then right now we're actually at the 6th floor, the BIC and Everest Biolab. So my co-founder George is over there. So we're starting a new company and doing it again. Just do it. So a little bit about NanoView. So started that in 2015, 2014, CEO, then moved in to COO position. And that technology was at a Salim Unlu's lab to look at biological nanoparticles. So we could visualize things that are traditionally invisible using a light microscopy technique. And that was really useful. And we pivoted a lot until we found this thing called exosomes. And we were really good at looking at exosomes. Okay, so we sold that company about 2 years ago and to a company called Unchained Labs. And so now it lives on as Leprechaun, the Irish theme here in Boston. And they had this cool little marketing video that I had no part in making.
You need a smoking vector to make viral solutions. Virus. Exosomes. Shoot it out.
So I think that video better describes technology than I do, right? So, all right. And it's funny for me because I didn't have any part in that. So this is now on its own little journey, like a kid on going to college, right? It's having fun. Oh, okay. I want to see it again. Okay, here we go. And so, yeah, thank you for all those questions that we had to think very hard about. And so for me, I was trying to think of what were some of the challenges we faced early on. As you talked about, product market fit was probably the hardest thing. So we didn't know what we had a really great hammer and we had to find the right nail to hit it with, right? So we did a lot of searching, viral diagnostics, proteins. We found exosomes and then we had a home run. One of the transitions is, in academics, you're focused on your publication, your research. In industry, it's all about communication, collaboration, and working together to get to the end goal. And then, of course, I was going to put resources, but we're going to talk about resources in a second. So I just said the dirty word of money. Money is the hardest part, right? So you need grants, you need venture capital. You need that to be able to accomplish the goals that you want. And so that's always a challenge, is making sure you have enough money. Okay, and then we talk about some of the resources at BU, and I love being up here right now because I love what BU's done for me to be able to get to this journey. So I try to highlight some of the things that help me get to it takes a village to be able to build something, right? So obviously Photonics Center, we work with Viral BSL4 at the Needle. There's a lot of interactions with the business school, and I love the science instrumentation facility. So they help machine and teach me machining for making a product. So that's a little gem BU has down over in the physics department. Mike Pratt. So I put people's pictures up, but obviously they're not the only one that did the work. So Mike, you did a lot of work, but you weren't the only one, but you were important. I put Ian Masheter, but all the entrepreneurship programs out of SMG, those were great. Worked with Salim, John Connor, Helen Fawcett was fantastic. Paul Mack downstairs, SIF, and everyone at the Business Innovation Center through Photonics Center has been extremely helpful. Yvonne, like facilities, those are really important things that have helped this journey. So BU helped with all of that. And of course, the people we just talked about. So not just the people we work with, but we ended up hiring our former students as IP attorneys. We brought our CEO from BU, who's an alum from the business school, our mentor, Rana Gupta, who used to work here. Parker Cassidy is an advisor who helped me introduce. Steve Scher was an engineer who became a director there. Oh, 1 minute. Okay, so that was fast. Okay, this was a really hard question, so I'm gonna just skip it. You can read it. BU has great resources. Okay, so what's the piece of advice? So I wasn't sure who would be here, but I think I-Core is the advice I'd leave you with. So you're going from science to entrepreneurship. I-Core is a program that'll help you get there. Okay, and then my last slide, because I won't have time. But I just want to thank Tom Bifano. I remember when you gave a speech at Bennett Goldberg's, and it left me at this. I'm not a good writer. ChatGPT helped. But I thought it was great. I edited it, obviously. But yes, and I'm out of time, so I won't even read it. All right. In Boston town, where minds ignite, stands a beacon of innovation burning bright. At BU's Photonics Center, they say, lives a leader, blazing trails every day. A visionary with boundless spark, guiding discoveries through the dark. From lasers to fibers, ideas take flight under this leader's visionary light. At BU Photonics, a leader thrives, pushing boundaries to new highs. In the heart of science, their name resounds, a pioneer where brilliance abounds.
All right, well, I'm so happy to be here back at BU. It's a pleasure to see you all and to honor Tom on this wonderful day here. My wife's birthday too, by the way. So I just want to talk a little bit about this technology and the company that we spun out. My name's Ed Damiano. I'm the founder and executive chair of the board of Beta Bionics. Co-founded Beta in 2015. My background is in biofluid dynamics, biomechanics, and basically mathematical biology. But then my son developed type 1 diabetes in infancy. And that was in 2000 when I was a young professor at the University of Illinois. And my wife, a pediatrician, made the diagnosis at 11 months of age for him, not her. And on he went to graduate from BU some 20 years later, living with diabetes for 20 years. In history and international relations. So he followed in my footsteps exactly. And that was really the inspiration behind this. So when I came to BU in 2004, building a bionic pancreas was really just a hobby. It wasn't a project. When Ken hired me, it was to do biomechanics and biofluid dynamics. And I had one corner of 50 slides talking about the bionic pancreas. And that ended up growing to consume the whole research program in about 10 years. And the device itself consists of, it's a wearable device. It's about the size of a credit card, 15 millimeters in thickness. And it's a wearable, fully automated glucose control system, delivers insulin, ultimately insulin and glucagon, communicates with a body-worn continuous glucose monitor made by a third-party company called Dexcom. And embedded in here is all the technology that grew out of my lab at BU. Working with a PhD student of mine, Firas Al-Khatib, we developed these algorithms that dosed insulin and glucagon on a 5-minute schedule. So this titrates 100% of all insulin dosing. And the thing about this device that's really unique, people use that word in business in a very sloppy way. I use it very precisely. This is truly unique in every one of these features. There's no device that can claim any one of these, let alone all of these. It's, initializing only body weight such that primary care physicians can use it. titrating 100% of all therapeutic insulin, no involvement by the user. This is truly a fully closed loop system. It's a self-driving car and insulin delivery. We got FDA clearance on my son's birthday last year, May 19th. The FDA was working hard with us to hit that date, which I thought was incredibly special of them to do. And we launched the product a month later. We've been out in the market for about 11 months. We have about 6,000 people on the island. And we did a massive pivotal trial published in the New England Journal of Medicine last year, or 2021. It was published in 2022. So that was a huge endeavor. It was a 22-year mission, and we're still going forward, pushing hard with the bihormonal. We just had a press release today about a partnership with the drug manufacturer of glucagon. But I just want to say that BU is sort of the resonant theme behind this whole story, right? So I came to BU with this idea in mind, but we were working on it a little bit in one student. But it was really the resources that BU brought from across the spectrum of this academic institution. Starting with the Office of Tech Development, I met with Mike Pratt on my interview. I insisted on my second round of interviews that I meet with this guy, who was a young, strapping young man with tons of hair. I think I got everybody's hair by that. I'm pretty sure that's where the hair went, and my son or something like that. So, but Office of Sponsored Programs was huge. I mean, over the course of this project, we raised about $30 million in research funding just in NIH and private foundation money, and $3 million in donations from moms and dads and people with type 1. It was just an amazing thing that the community reached out the way it did. And my grants administrator, Irina Ozakowski, which is, I doubt she's here, but I couldn't have done it without her, that's for sure. And then the other thing that I think was really remarkable about this project, and I think the project is special in many ways, but certainly the way it hit every academic level of administration. I mean, I had support for this project at the level of the university president's office, at the level of the provost's office, at the vice provost for research, at the dean's level, at the chair's level. It was really remarkable show of support for this project in some pretty rough, challenging times very often. Was that a 1 minute? Oh my goodness. Okay. So resource limitations. So I can't really blame academia for this. I don't really see academia having a role for this, but it was something that I needed and couldn't get here. I just had to learn it the hard way. And that was networks into the business world. How do you find a CFO and a chief operating officer? And how do you build a commercial team? I had no expectation of doing this. I was one of the most theoretical people in the Department of Biomedical Engineering. Nobody ever thought I was going to do anything useful. I was just going to publish a few papers that nobody would read. But indeed, I needed to know these kinds of people. I needed to circulate in these worlds. And that also was one of the most painful parts of this. One of the major pain points came from that, swimming in those seas. Education for founders on typical market terms for starting a company is something that would be helpful. And maybe business school could help with that, knowing what market terms are for stock buyback, stock classes, the incorporation of a company. I think we were really fell short there. And then finally, if I can move forward, it just gave me a message. I don't know what that means. I don't think it's up. Okay. So finally, transitioning from research funding to strategic investors, institutional investors. Every one of those financing activities, we ended up raising about $300 million in this effort after BU. They're really different interactions when you spin the company out, and then you're talking with strategic investors. We sort of skipped the VC round of financing. That was a different conversation. They have different things that they're interested in. Investors like Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, Big Pharma, than what institutional investors like hedge funds want, and mutual fund companies and pension funds. And each one of those relationships are very different. And how you approach each of those financing rounds, if you consider grants and contracts as one of those, it's really different. And learning that the hard way is really just, you got to get out there and do it. You just have to do it, right? Choosing the right people to trust or not to trust, that is the question. This was the pain point for Beta Bionics for me. This is the advice I would give myself, is to essentially be aware of the culture clash that is inevitable and will always arise between the academic engineering people that typically found these kinds of companies, these tech companies, and the world of business and investors. It's truly a culture clash. It's not just a matter of making sure everyone's hearing one another. We have different value sets, and that is a hard bridge to span. And that's something that was, I would say, at times excruciating and working across that table. But we're still standing in one form or another, and we're putting eyelets on people who need them. So I thank BU for its massive role in that success. Thanks very much, folks.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here, and congrats, Tom, once again. It's a major accomplishment. So my journey has been slightly different than the rest of the folks who are up here. So I graduated from BU in '96 with a PhD, and I've been working in startups since then. So I've been in the startup ecosystem, but it took my third startup to actually become a founder. So it's a slightly different journey. So I joined a company called Cascade Communications, started off as a software engineer. After finishing my PhD with another professor, Tom Little. I don't think he's here today. Oh, okay. Hey, Tom. Nice to meet you. And at that time, the internet was just coming up, and there was a big problem with sending video over the internet because bandwidth was limited. Of course, it's a very different world today. But so that's what my PhD was on. I worked in a telecom company called Cascade Communications. Followed, I started as a software engineer, ended up running a software department. After that, I did another startup called Airvana, which was in the cellular telecommunications space, and ended up running engineering there. And the third one was the one where I co-founded in 2020 a company called Affirm Networks, and we had an exit in 2020 with Microsoft acquiring us. And now I don't know what to do with myself. Basically part of a bunch of angel groups, working with the D Lab under started by Ken, and working with Elise now. So that's my journey. But even though you see BU only in the first slide, actually BU is actually there in every slide, because when I was at BU, I had a professor called Hassan Ahmed, who I did my master's thesis with, who was connected to the industry. And he took me to Motorola, who actually sponsored part of my PhD. And he ended up being at Cascade. He was the VP of engineering there when I joined Cascade. He was on the board at Airvana, and then I co-founded a firm with him. So, so it's all due to the BU connections that I was able to make this journey. Okay, so I guess the big question is, and again, my journey is slightly different than this, but if you're coming from a research community and you're trying to do a startup or join the industry, there are a few challenges, and I'm seeing these mostly as an angel investor when companies come to present deals. What I find is that a lot of those presentations coming from universities starts off with a solution rather than a problem, because it's all centered on the research. And so people are excited about the work they've done. So they say, hey, here's my research. And oh, by the way, it solves this problem, right? And in the industry, you're starting with a solution, with a problem and not a solution. So what you want to see is, what is the problem that needs to be solved? Why is it significant? And then how are you solving it? So it's a different mindset, and it makes a big difference in terms of how the perception comes across. So that's an important part of the puzzle. The other thing is that the trade-offs you have to make in the academic world versus the commercial world are very different. I mean, somebody had mentioned time, deadlines and so on. But there are a lot of constraints in terms of money, in terms of what you decide to do, in terms of the risks you're taking and the pivots you have to make, compared to a slightly more insular world in academia. And also the rewards and motivations are slightly different, in the real world. So it's important to keep that in mind when you have a change of environment. And the last thing is that I think somebody had mentioned, you want to hire people who are not like you. Essentially, it's about team building. And there are a lot of pieces beyond the technology and the research that are needed to make the company successful. So it's really important to surround yourself with the right people and build a team and manage the team. So in terms of resources that BU can provide, I'm actually part of co-chairing a committee right now for Elise, which is talking about industry engagement. So a lot of this is coming from that. But really, it's all based on innovation that's happened at BU. So it's important that when you start a company, that BU supports you in many different ways. One of them is around filing the IP. So if the invention has happened at BU, then you want to file BU to be filing the IP for you. But more importantly, the licensing piece, which is a stumbling block because eventually that impacts the margins. And if it's unclear, investors don't want to invest. Okay. And then around things like technology moat is very important for investors, because you want to make sure nobody else comes in and takes the idea and does solve the same problem the same way. So it's really important to basically try to leverage what BU can provide, and the idea is to get the seed money, the seed startup space, et cetera, so that you can get off the ground running. And this is just from a startup perspective, what is important for a startup. Again, a lot of engagement with the university in terms of finding the right people, finding the right projects, and developing internships, so on. So a lot of the talent can come from the university, along with access to the research that's happening at the university. And just the last thing around, one key learning, there are obviously lots of key learnings over 30+ years, but the biggest one is to embrace risk, because it's a very different world. And risk is only because you're making a bet on the future, and the future is unknown. So you're making a lot of assumptions, whether it's at the market or whether you're talking about the product itself, how you're selling it. And so the idea here is to understand what risks you're taking, what assumptions you're making, and keep testing those assumptions and change, adapt, and pivot as needed. So that would be my advice.
In the same order, but no. Instructions. What I liked about this panel is it's all part of our BU community. Innovation's happening here. It's happening all around. I see it because it's all coming into our office, but I think a lot of people in the community don't realize how much is actually going on, and to reach out left and right to people who've been through it before, I think is important. It can help you up, bring the next generation of people up. So thank you for those stories, and thank you for sharing them and coming in to share them. I appreciate that. I do have a few questions, none about Tom. So you can relax for a little bit. But just to get going, and I'll start with just a brass tacks one. This one's a group question, so we can go, I guess, right down the order. And it's really about the patents and the licensing. Anand was bringing that up in the thing that's central to what I do. But just for the audience sake, I want them to see the variety between your different businesses and how important the IP is to your business, and the license, whether you needed it or not, and when was it critical to have the license, and just kind of rapid fire. Maybe we'll start in order, Ed down this way, and I think you might have to use that thing. I think you have to turn it on if it's not on.
So yeah, the IP around the algorithms that dose insulin is the core of the technology at Beta Bionics, right? That is the differentiating piece of it all. So we really couldn't be having this conversation if it weren't for that. And so we needed to get that licensed. In fact, it was contingent at a BU when we started the company, and it was contingent upon that license deal being done, that before Lily would put the first $5 million into the company. We had 40 days to get that job done, and Mike just worked around the clock, and we got the deal done before that money was going to evaporate on the 1st of January at 5 minutes to midnight on the 31st of December. So that was the kind of timeline we were up against. And to Mike's credit and that team, OTD, they got it done, but we are absolutely essential. That's the essential core of the IP we rely upon, and Beta Bionics is licensing that IP, and we are using it in the iLet, and it is what allows us to practice the art that we're practicing. And there are other, semi-automated devices out there that would have us for lunch if it weren't for
that. We actually didn't start off with a lot of IP coming from BU. There was a couple of things that we had, but mainly the licensing that we had this was Tom's idea. The technology was Tom's idea. So we were able to just basically take part of Tom's brain. The good part. That's what I know. So while our relationship with BU has been great, and I'm happy that we did that license, that actually wasn't a critical part of that. Intellectual property wasn't a critical part of what our company's able to do.
In my case, most of the innovation was not basic research based, so it wasn't patentable in that sense, but it was about optimizing stuff that was already out there. But it's really important, even beyond that, to build a patent portfolio, as a small company. Even if you're not going to take the patent and sue anybody, it's more for defensive reasons, so other people don't sue you for basic things. So it's important to keep focused on that.
I think I heard that a patent is just the right to sue, right? So I'm somewhere in between, where I think Ed and Paul, where IP, we created a moat, right? IP was really important as we started, but as the company developed, we innovated and created new IP. So, you know, we created a moat around our core IP and then continued to augment that. So it was important, especially for investors, for acquisition, but you continue to innovate.
Super, thanks. Next ones are just a couple individual questions. And Paul, I just wanted to start with you if you can remember. Why did you choose to start a company, and what was your thinking kind of getting a company going 25 years ago, and do you regret it? No, I didn't. That's not the second time.
I don't regret it. I'll try to make this quick. So I was actually working for Tom for a small business that was spun out of BU before he started Boston Recognition. That company had done great work. It was at a stage where it might not have had a long future ahead of it. I remember very well, Tom called me and said, there's this thing called an FCTR. There's a technology coming out of BU. Maybe we should go over and start a company. And so I remember explicitly I was in a hotel in Anaheim and said, sure, let's go and do this. So I was young. I was newly married. My wife had a full-time job. So I just, so that my really point is, I just did it. No regrets. So it was a slightly different approach. I didn't come with the technology. I came basically with the person and went from there.
Awesome. And Anand, when you give advice to founders now, especially someone, a young faculty member, let's say, coming out of the labs, or an older faculty member, how do you coach them in deciding whether or not they take that leap? Because it's a big commitment to start a company. And what sort of advice do you give people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty long road. I mean, typically, if you do a startup today, by the time, if you're lucky and things go your way, by the time you actually see any rewards, maybe 7 to 10 years, and sometimes more. And along the way, there's going to be lots of bumps, up and downs. So I think it's all about resiliency, really believing in your idea, and ensuring that, as I mentioned, you have to keep bouncing off from the customers, make sure that what you're doing is the right thing, and have the guts to change it if it needs to be changed.
That's a good segue, because my next question is for Dave. I want you to drill into that pivot a little more, because I saw it from the sidelines, but you danced for several years, and maybe you could just share that story with people.
Sure, I'll try to be brief. Yeah, I think we spent about 2 years doing okay, let's start a company. We have some cool technology, but we had to find that product market fit. So we looked around. We had a little bit of money. John Connor just walked in, so he helped pay the bills, I think, in the early days. And then we kind of had to pivot around a few times, and we definitely ran out of money. I mean, like, we were so close to not. I mean, we weren't getting paid. There was a period of time. So you have to be resilient to that word. And then we've clicked. We talked to someone, one of our collaborators, and they go, you know what, why don't we use it we'd like to buy one of your boxes for this. And we're like, what's an exosome? And then all of a sudden, the more we talk to people, like, this is a huge problem. All you have to do is sell it for exosomes. You don't have to do any other work. It was like, okay. And everything clicked after that. Investors paid attention. And so that's how your story. So you have to have resilience. I think that was the main thing. And you have to keep knocking on doors, talking to people, get outside the building, and make sure that you investigate what you're trying to solve that problem first. So one last comment real quick. It's definitely better to start with the problem and the solution. We came with the hammer looking for the nail. That's much harder, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Ed, next is you. The company's doing well. It's great success, but you had a near-death moment, and not your personally, but the company. And I don't know if you could what you feel comfortable sharing about that, but it's an important lesson, I think, that you do, as Dave said, come cash crunching. Maybe you could share that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So, we tried to keep this in academia as long as possible. I did not, I wanted to try and, use strategic money as much as possible, avoid VC financing. We started the company as a benefit corporation. But when we finally spun it out 12 years into the project, and there was a lot of pressure to try and do that earlier, but I'm glad we did hold off. It still was, I was trying to do it in a different way from the traditional medtech startup. And I was thinking of a nonprofit. I was talking to Bob Brown about a nonprofit, and he looked at me with a straight face. He kind of humoring me, tapping me on the back of the head, fine job, lad, but you're crazy, right? To raise tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars as a nonprofit. But he was polite about it. But ultimately, we decided to have a benefit corporation. We raised money from big pharma. But I really tried to put off sort of engaging institutional investors longer than I should have. And we got down a road of very little cash. We had about $11 million in from pharma. And by the end of 18, we were drying up, and we had about 18 employees, and we had to keep the lights on, keep people paid. So we started a Series B2 financing, which would be the first time we started engaging institutionals. But before I really let that go, we continued talking to strategics and burning the candle. And then finally, first quarter of 2018 or so, we were almost cash out. Actually, we carried a negative balance over the 4th of July weekend in 2018, but we were really close to closing about a $50 million deal with Eventide and RTW, and these are big, hedge funds and mutual fund companies. We did have to bail out Beta, Toby and Ed did a few times, so we put $150,000 into an equity investment, which was truly insane that we did that. Both of our kids were going to BU, so we had this little thing called a 90% discount coming our way. So we took the college fund and said, well, we'll show show everybody we have confidence in the company, which we didn't, we just did it. And then they come to us saying, we need manufacturing space in Irvine, California. We need you to underwrite or, be a guarantor of a 7-year lease. Sure, we'll do that too. 55,000 square feet we're on the hook for. And then, 4 months later, we write a check for $55,000 for a loan. That's the college fund, right? For a loan for the company to get 6 more weeks of payroll. But we got it. And that got us just enough oxygen to get to that first closing of the Series B. And then, another 60 million came in within 10 months. So when it rains, it pours. But closing those gaps was hard. And it did mean taking some serious risk to one of the slides just talked about risk, right? And that was risky business. So.
We're not trying to scare everybody. Please try to do it. One last question, then we'll get to our celebration. This will be for the group. We'll just maybe go in reverse order, David, towards me. And for our community, if you could just share, one thing we could do to make this better for emerging companies and projects that want to spin out a BU. What's something the BU community could do to rally behind them?
Yes, this is a tough question, and thank you for helping us think about it, because I actually looked around. I think BU's done a fantastic job, and so it's really connecting the dots. I think one of the slides talked about how can we bring all these different BU, innovative BU, the OTD, what we do here at Photonics Center, all these things. The connection to me is the hard part. Is you kind of discovered on your, at least my experience was discovering on its own. So I glossed over my slides, but like an entrepreneur in residence program, or Mike, you were instrumental in introducing us to Parker Cassidy, for example, who was instrumental for us success. So that kind of mentorship, I think, is, so for faculty, I think it's important to find like an executive, a leader for the young graduate students that are trying to do it themselves, finding a mentor. So I think that's the gap. And there's been programs, but I think the hard part is setting up like a 10-year plan around making them continuous.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm working with a couple of companies coming out of BU right now, mentoring them. And I think the biggest missing piece is the business development piece. So great research, great technology, but that part is missing. And if there's anything that BU can do, maybe leverage a school of management collaboration there to help, in the initial stages, that would make a big difference.
I'm just going to combine those two and say that having more programs, I've been involved with a few programs, but it was years ago of having people like us going over and talking to students, and maybe a younger group than me, but getting more people to go over and talk to students that are interested in doing that, so they have more confidence and have more exposure to it. And then, as I mentioned in my slides, just more of that, this point of biz dev, of getting an understanding of what it actually means to have to run a business, and what things you have to think about, because we're all coming from this academic research background, and we all think we know what we're supposed to be doing because we're all smart people, but we don't, and we need to figure out how to do that.
Ed, the last word. Wow.
Yeah, well, so I think, one thing I think BU was really important with BU is they were very patient with me. They took a long time to sort of watch this narrative unfold. I didn't know where it was going to go. They didn't either. They were really patient. I don't know that they can extend that level of patience to every project, and similarly with the resources they have at OTD. So that's always a constraint, making choices about what's going to be, what they're going to pursue in the way of IP and not. But also that kind of patience and that kind of sort of administrative support I got at all levels of the institution. I suspect that's something that's hard to expand and scale to other projects, but that was essential to our success. But I think that the hard part is is the transitioning to a business and knowing all the functional areas of what a business does. And I presume the business school has some expertise there. And to the extent that there can be crosstalk between those that have experience with startups and corporate structure and governance and things like that, and business development and core functions of a med tech company or pharma company, to the extent that can crosstalk and cross-pollinate with the technical parts of the institution, engineering and sciences, that where the spinouts come from, I think that cross-pollination could be great. I don't see a lot of that, and maybe there's an opportunity for improvement there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. You'll be around for the reception. If people have questions, feel free to approach them and ask them about other things they didn't get to share about. Next, I'd like to invite Gloria up to present the Innovator of the Year Award. Thank you, you guys.
That's it. Yeah. After you're done.
Okay, so first of all, thanks, Mike, for organizing this event and the panel. The panel was fantastic. And actually, one of the things that Mike has been working on for the past 6 months, I'd say, is a white paper that we've given to the provost and president about how he plans to really increase the amount of support that we have for faculty entrepreneurship. We have Innovate for Students, and we have bits and pieces of things, as everybody here has said. We have, the Office of Tech Transfer, we have gap funding, we have the BIC, but they're not under an umbrella. And so that's one of the things we've been working on. And so we are absolutely going to pick all your brains as we try to roll this out. And we're at the process of getting input from people and thinking about how best to do it. So really great to hear that. And those were really inspirational talks. But right now, I'm really delighted to announce the winner of our 14th annual Innovator of the Year competition. So I think, as you all know, the Innovator of the Year Award recognizes an outstanding faculty member who's translated world-class research into an invention or an innovation that benefits humankind. That's what our mission for the award says. So each year we ask the faculty to nominate from the faculty at large an awardee, and then the awardee is chosen by their peers. So other innovators vote to decide who is going to be the Innovator of the Year. And I think, as you know, one of our missions as a university is to really support and catalyze research that has a positive influence on society. And I think, as you can see from our panel today, we're really focused on, as our strategic plan says, research that matters. And clearly everybody's doing research that does matter, of the folks that we heard from today. And so we've had really important innovators in the past for the Innovator of the Year Award. So Ed was one of our recipients. We've also had novel ways of diagnosing lung cancer, treatment for kidney disease, building technologies that find security flaws in computer chips, a wide range of work that people here at BU to do. But I'm really thrilled that the faculty decided to honor Tom Bifano for a number of reasons. So I think, as you all know, Tom's a professor in mechanical engineering in the College of Engineering, and he directs the Photonics Center where we are right now. And clearly this is a center that has world-class researchers and really faculty that are studying light and many of its potentials. Tom's own work has led to discoveries that directly affect the field of photonics and well beyond, I think, the field of photonics. He's developed deformable mirrors. Whenever I hear this, I think of those mirrors in funny places. Weird. I don't think that's what you have in mind. Using MEMS technology, and they dramatically improve satellite communications, eye exams, and imaging research, a wide range of really important things. And based on this, Tom founded Boston Micro Machines, which we heard about today. And the company's really now a world leader in the development and production of deformable mirrors, not for fun parks, but for important things like microscopes and telescopes. And it really produces a wide range of commercially available instruments, from special purpose DoD applications to large format mirrors that are used in telescopes and looking for exoplanets and all sorts of things like that. But I think more important than even what Tom has done for the company that he's developed and those sorts of things is really the impact that he's had at BU beyond his own lab, and even beyond the Photonics Center. So in terms of innovation, I think it's clear that there are many people who've benefited tremendously from Tom's mentorship, from what he's developed here in the Photonics Center. He's been an incredible advocate for innovation at BU and really a partner. I think with everybody here, his mentorship has influenced the career trajectories of many faculty and students, and many BU Innovators of the Year actually have been from the Photonics Center, and I think that says a lot. Tom is incredibly generous with his time and his efforts and his knowledge and his experiences, and he's really built systems to support people and to support researchers who want to pursue commercialization. And he's really created a sort of an innovation ecosystem here at BU, I would say. I think this is really the center of it. And so those are very important things. But I also have to say just a few things about Tom as a friend and colleague, because he is an amazing person in so many ways. So I first came to know about Tom because I didn't know who he was. I was the dean of a College of Health and Rehab Sciences when I took this job as the VP for research. And President Brown organized a day-long retreat where we were to talk about research centers and which research centers did we have, how could we have better ones, which ones should be university-wide. And at the time, we didn't have very many good university-wide centers. There was Photonics, and the Hariri was in its infancy, I'd say. And we spent the day talking about research centers. What should they be? What would make a good one? Why would we want to have them? And those sorts of things. And we talked about Photonics as the best example of what we wanted our research centers to be. And we said, well, why is it so great? And so people said, well, it's got a building, it's got a large budget, it's got good faculty. And then I realized, well, actually, it's got great leadership, right? That's what makes for one of the most important things. And at the time I said, Tom is a philanthropic leader. I have used that term a million times since that meeting. And now when I go to hire somebody, I look for somebody who's a philanthropic leader. I realized Tom is in this because he cares about BU. He cares about the field. He cares about the work that people are doing. He wants everything to be better for everyone else. He's not building this up for himself. He's building it up for what he thinks could be created here at BU. And so that was such an important realization to me, and really important in a leadership role to think about what you want other leaders to be. And Tom is really the model that I have in mind for the kind of leaders that we're looking for. The other thing that I was saying about Tom is it's just a lot of fun to be with him. He can make the most boring topic fun and interesting. So Tom, for years, has sat on the Research and Scholarly Activities Committee. This is not an exciting committee. This is the committee that makes rules and policies about researchers and what they can and can't do. And Tom is in there kicking and fighting and giving his opinions all along the way. He will say what he thinks, and not just about that. He'll give me a call or send me an email saying, Gloria, this is good or bad or whatever. And it is so wonderful to have somebody who you trust, who'll tell you the truth, and who will just be honest. But then, give it up if you can't fix whatever it is that he wants you to fix or whatever. So we have so much fun at the Research and Scholarly Activities Committee, and it is really not a very exciting topic that we deal with, but it is really just the sense of camaraderie and sense of humor. And, the topic is important, but Tom's contribution to it is huge. So it's really an honor to be able to say that you are the Innovator of the Year. There are a lot of other great terms that could be used to describe you. Innovator is one of them, but you are a fantastic friend, colleague. So congratulations. Yes. Okay. Congratulations.
Oh my God. This will be buried.
I know a lot of people who've gotten these, and I never see them up anywhere. So I think It's good sense. Uh, First of all, I just want to say I'm very moved and grateful. And I'm not going to tell you anything about these companies or my innovation. It's for me, this is just a moment to give you back some gratitude. I'm really grateful. I'm grateful even there when I first came here at BU as an assistant professor, started the first company that Paul alluded to. And BU was not good at innovation at that time. So there was a guy, his name was John Bagley. He's in heaven now. He was a leader in the style of John Silber. He went to Yale with John Silber. And I had an idea, and the idea was to start this company that was going to do something for compact discs. And he liked the idea. It was the first Photonics Center incubation company. And we went in and I pitched to him what I wanted to do. And he said, "You're going to give us 40% of that company." And I said, "Well, that doesn't sound fair." And he said to me, and Mike knows this story, he said to me, "Son, I am not trying to be fair." And I learned so much from that. And it was really, he was not a bad person. He was just doing what at that time was BU. And so the thing you've seen today is such an arc from that moment. Because the second company that we started was with Mike Pratt, and it was just a completely different world. It was a wonderful, wonderful difference. So I'm grateful to John Bagley for that. I really am. And of course, I'm hugely grateful to Paul Bierden, because Paul didn't give you the whole experience, but I can say this, at 10 years into that company, the second company, Boston Micro Machines, Paul's family invited us to, I don't know, it was a lobster thing down at the beach. They have a beach house. And Paul's father introduced me as the guy who kept Paul from ever getting a job. And he said it with derision. He really thought I had ruined his son's life. And I love that about him. And that first company was crashed and burned. Paul didn't really say that. It was a company that had a great big market that was dying as we were getting into it. It was making compact disc stampers. And it was dying as we went into it, and we were saving all sorts of money and for the process, but it was ridiculous to try to get into an equipment business for a company where everybody was running for the hills. So that company crashed. And then I'm grateful to this guy named Ken Gabriel, who came to BU for 8 weeks. He was only here as a professor for 8 weeks, did not like it, left. But before he left, he taught me about MEMS. This microelectromechanical systems. And why me? Why did he teach me? Because the people who were here in MEMS, he didn't like them. They didn't like him. And he and I got along really well. He taught me about MEMS. And then he left, and we talked about this idea of making deformable mirrors. And he left, and he went to DARPA, and he just gave me piles and piles of money just for absolutely no good proposal. And in fact, he said, and Paul knows this, he said, I sent him a proposal, and you can't do this at NSF or NIH. I sent him a proposal, and he sent it back, and he said, "This is a great proposal, but you asked for not nearly enough money. Double it, and then we'll send it back." And he doubled it, sent it back, and he gave me all sorts of money for that. So that was great. And that was the deformable mirrors, which was incredibly hard. I was thinking about Ed Damiano. Well, his technology was super hard. Making deformable mirrors is super hard, but there's no market. There's absolutely no market. Like curing diabetes. Okay, now you've got something. That's a market. But so Paul and I started this business without any sense of market. And who did we hire as marketing? We didn't hire the guy from my lab. We hired someone from Selim's lab. It was Slava Men as our marketing director. And then when he didn't work out, we hired another engineer from BU as our marketing director. So we clearly had no sense of marketing. I'm grateful to Stephen Cornelison, who's another master's student, came out of my lab, and he's just the best engineer. And he is someone who taught me that in companies, you can't do science projects. And you would think that I would understand that because, intellectually, it's not a hard concept. But Stephen really taught me that. And he's just a wonderful engineer. And I'm really grateful. I'm grateful to Tom Dudley, who's not here, but he helped transform our Business Innovation Center. So Gloria gives me credit for that, but that was really Tom Dudley. He took the Business Innovation Center and said, how can we make this something wonderful for BU? And then I just took credit for it when it came up. I'm grateful to Gloria, who really trusts us to try to do things for entrepreneurship. So we've had all sorts of different versions of what goes on in the Business Innovation Center. We have a lot of leeway. And it's not that Gloria just lets us do whatever we want, but when we do something, I can count on her to, if it fails, to not fire me over that. She says, okay, good effort. Let's try something different then. And so that's BU. BU gives you that opportunity, both in entrepreneurship, but also in program management, in making these things happen. I'm grateful to my colleagues, Jerome Mertz, Sila Munlu, Xin Zhang, Jishin Cheng, and Ed Damiano, who are all previous winners of this. Every one of those people has been an inspiration to me. Really, really they have, each in a different way. But that inspiration has been something that I really couldn't live without. So I'm really grateful for them. And I'm grateful to BU. There is not a better university in the world as far as I'm concerned, and partly because of things like this, the celebration of people here. So thank you all so much. I'm grateful.